So both of these drones are fantastic at getting really good nighttime video, but out of the box, you do have to change some settings on both of these drones to get the very best video quality. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about my 5 top tips of how I get great looking video quality on these drones at night. But before we get into this first point, if you are new around here, please consider subscribing. I do weekly tech and drone content, loads of different views, tutorials, cinematic videos, and loads more to come. So make sure you subscribe if you're new around here. Let's get into this first bit. Now, to get the very best video quality out of these drones, you need to have a brief understanding about how the exposure works. So the settings that you've got to dial in. So exposure, this is a massive topic. It's a full video at least. I'm just going to briefly swift over it and then have a look at it in your own time. Now, you've probably heard this referred to as the exposure triangle. So the exposure is made up of 3 different elements: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, and it's down to you to get these settings correct on the drone itself, so then that end result is so much better. Now, if you look on your DJI Fly app, so just get your controller and then you look on the right hand side at the very bottom. When you're on Pro settings, you will see an indicator that says MM. This is your exposure value, and you want it to be round about that 0 mark. So if it's underexposed, it might say like -2, -3. And if it's overexposed, it might say +2, +3, +1. It doesn't have to be bang on 0. This is where people get it wrong, but kind of close to 0 is the best way that your exposure is going to be correct. Now, if it's a plus exposure, it's going to be overexposed. So you're going to have this really bright highlights, not going to look good. And underexposed is going to be the opposite. It's going to be really dark, loads of grain, loads of noise. Now we're focusing on nighttime video. So we've got a few hurdles to jump. So once you've got these settings dialed in and you have a better understanding about exposure, we can then look at the number 1, which is the first tip. This is how to get the very best quality, and this is by using Pro settings. Okay, so I've touched on there about Pro settings. I really highly recommend, if you're filming at nighttime, to go from Auto to Pro. Now in Auto, it does an okay job, but the drone will automatically bump the ISO as high as possible to keep that exposure correct. And the downside to that is the higher the ISO, the more noise and the more grain. So all the video shots you've just seen there, none of them were in Auto, they're all in Pro settings. So I can control that ISO. The lower the ISO is going to be less noise, but you're going to have some kind of ISO. So 1600 is great on the Mini 3 Pro. There's not much noise. I find that works the best. This example here, I've changed it from Auto to Pro, so it automatically selected ISO 3200. I'm going to switch that now to 1600, and I'm also going to change my shutter speed to 1/50, so it's a little bit sharper. So them settings now look great. You can see the exposure is slightly underexposed, but look at this video quality now. Hardly any noise at all. The video looks nice and sharp. There is some lights, it is fairly lit, but it's still a really dark situation in some areas. By having these correct settings, it looks great. Now, if you film at ISO 3200 on here or in Auto, you will see more noise, so it doesn't look as good. So it's a big one. Go and practice your Pro settings and then move around with that ISO to try and keep the exposure value fairly correct. The lower the ISO number, the better it's going to look. So why not just select ISO 100 if that's the best possible quality? Well, I've seen people do this, and at nighttime, it's terrible. You see, we can't control the aperture on here, so that's fixed, remember, f1.7. If we selected ISO 100, the only thing that drone can then change, or you're going to have to change to get your exposure correct, is the shutter speed. So your shutter speed is going to be really low, extremely low, to have an ISO of 100. So then your footage is going to look like it's in slow motion. It's going to look really choppy and blurry. At nighttime, it's going to look terrible. So ISO 100 in the daytime, for sure, brilliant. At nighttime, it's not going to happen. Your shutter speed is going to be really bad. Unless you're in a really bright area, like the Vegas Strip example. If you're flying over there, it's going to be super bright. You might be able to have an ISO 100, but generally at nighttime, you can't. So stick to ISO 1600 or less, but don't go for ISO 100. Your shutter speed has to be 1/50 as a minimum to get decent, sharp looking video. Any less than that, it's going to just fall apart pretty quick. Now, ND filters is where people go wrong. I use ND filters myself all of the time, every single time I fly in this drone in the daytime, whether it's the Mavic 3 or the Mini 3 Pro, but as soon as sunset has finished, my ND filter is off. I do not use it at nighttime because an ND filter will reduce the amount of light going into that sensor. So at nighttime, we want as much light as we can. We don't want to reduce it, and that's what an ND filter is going to do. So if you keep your ND filter on and it's nighttime and you're filming over a city, this ISO is going to be bumped even higher, which is going to look even worse. So take your ND filters off. Now, the only caveat to that is you can get what's called a light pollution filter. So I've got one on this example here. And what this does is if you're in an area where you're filming like a building or a tower or something like that, which has got really bright lights, this will reduce some of that. So it won't be as obvious, as bright. It will reduce some of that glare. But generally you could kind of bypass that. I've got it on this shot here and it works well because there's loads of competing lights. But overall, you don't really need them. But if you buy a set and it comes with it, have a go. But generally do not use like an ND 4, 8, 16, anything like that at night time. That's where your footage is going to fall apart. Never use an ND filter at night. And something you're also going to need is music. Now, this video is sponsored by my friends at Epidemic Sound. One of the biggest challenges of a creator is finding music that perfectly matches the video. Good music, good sound effects will instantly enhance the quality of that video production. Now, drone content with good cinematic or fast-paced music is a great match. And then add some sound effects on top of it like wind, wave and transition noises, and this will drastically enhance that quality. Now, Epidemic is great for this. They have a massive library of restriction-free music that you can use without the fear of a copyright strike and not being able then to monetize your videos. And if you want to try this out for yourself, go and check out my link and you get a 1-month free trial. So music is massive, so important. So go and check this out. Thanks so much to Epidemic for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the next point. And if all else fails, you can cheat. So if you've got a decent editor like Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, you can use noise reduction software in the editor app and it will use AI to make your footage look better. So this is cheating, but I mean, on the Mavic 3, it's kind of cheating as well. This has its own built-in night video now. We saw it on the firmware updates a few months ago on the Mavic 3, the Mavic 3 Classic, and this just does fantastic. So you can just select night video and it will automatically reduce any noise. It will bump the ISO a little bit, but the video quality straight out of this is incredible. So we don't always have the Mavic 3 on hand though. You might not have a Mavic 3. What about on here? Well, if your footage looks pretty bad, well, it's not going to make really shit footage look fantastic. So those settings are still important. But just say you had all your settings dialed in, it looked great, but then you put it into your editor like Final Cut Pro and you still had a bit of noise. So you can go into effects, you can type in noise reduction and you can drag the noise reduction effect onto your clip. And then you'll see in the top right hand corner, you can then select how much noise reduction you want. So you can do the maximum amount of noise reduction and then keep the sharpness either low or medium. And then it will reduce any noise with AI software on that video and make it look great. Now, I wouldn't say do that all the time. Sometimes it looks pretty fake, but it's an option. If you want to cheat doing this, you can. And finally, at night time, you might have an area where there's loads of competing lights. And this drone is flying and it's focusing on like the main object, the main building. It's got loads of lights on it, but there's also lights in the background. So make sure you get your controller. When you've got your drone lined up wherever you're filming, you then go onto the screen and just tap on the objects. In this example here, a tower. So I would tap. So that tower now has the focus point. I've tapped on it. And then the drone will then focus on that and not everything behind it. The worst thing you want to do is take what looks like to be this great footage on the screen, and then you get home and notice it's not in focus and the background's in focus. And then there's literally like nothing you can do about that. So at night time, especially, I'm just tapping on that screen quite a lot to make sure what I am filming is the main focus points. So you use that on either of these, but generally those are the 5 tips that I would do to get really great looking video. Now, I know not every country you can fly at night. If you can do, then go for it. There are quite a lot of challenges at night time, more so than the daytime. One, you can't really see any overhead wires or any different buildings, obstructions. So it is a challenging flying at night time, 100%. So be careful when doing this. But if you can, and you're in an area where you can fly it, go and have a practice doing these, change these settings, and just seeing improvements. Even do like a shot in auto and then go into pro, lower your ISO, get your settings dialed in and just look at that difference. It's a noticeable difference. And if you have the Mavic 3, then you don't need to watch any of these, just stick it into night video and you're done. But if you liked this video and you're interested about how to use hyperlapses, that's another fantastic feature that you can do at night time. I did a video on that, so go and check it out at the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed that. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing. Make sure you like this if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.